Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us on Accelerate.
Thank you.
I wonder if you just tell us about yourself and what you've done in your background, first of all.
My background's pretty varied. I've been everything from a nightclub DJ to a factory hand to office manager and so on. But I was primarily trained in media way back when, 20 years ago, and did a journalism traineeship on the back of that to finish it. So my background led into some radio announcing and TV and so on. So it's always been about content and communications at some point. And then when I had an opportunity to take a redundancy a few years ago, I got out of the office and back into a marketing role, which was well timed because it was when the whole Twitter, social media, blogging thing was beginning to grow back in early 2007. So from that point then, I found myself in the middle of the best sort of petri dish of experimentation of digital marketing as it was still evolving from its embryonic beginnings to a point now where I'm working for larger brands on their whole social media strategies. So
I know you're a big advocate of content marketing. Could you tell me how you particularly define that?
In a sense, I find content marketing an odd tag to put on it in the first place because to me it's just marketing. And I think it's a phrase that's just come up again recently. A lot of people are going, what's this new content marketing? As a way of getting the discussion back around to saying, well, actually, no, this is marketing the way it always was. And actually, the last 10 years was the blip when we got caught up in digital analytics and widgets and all the technology that promised us so much, but ended up delivering a far more, a colder marketing environment. You know, something people weren't people, they were numbers on a spreadsheet. And content marketing, I think, is about recognising that they are people again.
So, do you feel that sort of content, I suppose we just call it content or content marketing, gets the sort of recognition and the understanding that it sort of needs at the moment?
No. And again, I think it's because, and that was a very black and white answer, and I'm sure that there are people at every stage from black to white in this with lots of shades of grey, but there's still a trend towards digital marketing as it has been done more recently. So for example, when you might explain content marketing to one person, they go, that's SEO. If you might explain content marketing to someone else, they go, that's email, or that's traditional direct marketing, or that's, and they frame it within their own experience. And actually, content marketing sits above all of that. And each of those methodologies or each of those groupings, including social media and so on, are just means of delivering that content marketing or have very strong overlap with.
So I think that a lot of marketers probably struggle with the idea of content and also of, creating engaging content on an ongoing basis. What would your advice be to them, or how do you approach that? Obviously you have experience in media anyway. But.
It is about allocating the time in your schedule appropriately. And I think the first challenge is people don't seem to have any time allocating the time to do their SEO, for example. Or we want to have X number of landing pages and so on. It's like, well, it can be the same task. It's just, I plan that landing page better, and therefore, you're using your time better. On the other hand, when you are, it is about if you are doing the content yourself, and you are, for example, have to find those 2 or 3 blog posts that you're going to put out every week on a regular basis without getting distracted, otherwise the blog dies. Then it is about identifying those best times in your week when you can just block that time out in your diary and do it, and allow that hour and a half that it will take you to produce a quality piece blog post. For myself, for example, my own blogs that I run outside of work, I know when my wife is watching those TV shows that I can't stand. And so like 7:30 on a Sunday when she's watching 60 Minutes, I know that's my blogging time. If she was a blogger, she would probably pick when I'm watching Top Gear. You know, but I mean, that way, it's time I can put aside that's actually not conflicting with my family life. In work, I would do it the same way. So it's like, you know, where are your opportunities in the week to do it, that you know you're not going to be interrupted or called upon, block that out and make sure that you stick to it each week.
I suppose that, you know, that comes back a bit to understanding, or at least, or acknowledging the actual ROI of doing content. I think there's a lot of confusion around that. How do you...
I find it odd that ROI is sort of the default question that comes up, because no one asks the ROI about other things that rely on the content to be successful in the first place. So, for example, you know, no one asks about the ROI of the telephones in the office, but you know that you need a good sales script on that phone for that to actually be beneficial to your sales team, and that's content in one form. So, if you understand that content, that producing quality content with the right goals in mind, and that's something else to talk about, is actually making your other activities more effective and having more control over how those activities drive customer actions, then the ROI becomes part of your bigger marketing discussion. It shouldn't be, I want to know what the ROI of my social media is separately from everything else. Because if you're treating it that way, then you're giving it a level of accountability that you're not applying to everything else. Why, you know, should that be treated separately when really it's part of the same cycle of customer journey through your typical customer? And if you're looking at ROI in terms of customer conversion and how much that customer is worth to you at an end sense, could be interpreted in a number of ways. Because a customer may have multiple hit points before they finally do that single action that converts them at the end. If they hit that search engine marketing advert, which is the point at which they finally buy the product, they could actually have been engaging with you and different forms of content that you have released for weeks, if not months, beforehand, before they actually go, you know what, that's the product I want, and I'm going to go back to them now and I'll put them into it, and there's the link, and I'm going to buy it. But somehow a lot of businesses still give 100% of the credit for that ROI to that final action, discounting everything that prepared and primed that customer to a point where they're ready to make that purchase.
Could you talk a little more about how you've seen, in your experience of content, you know, take people along that cycle, or what kind of content you find effective?
Sure. As a step-by-step process, the first thing is to understand, well, firstly, who your customers are, and have brief buyer personas for them. So that you understand that, you know, the people who are coming to your website have these behaviours, they're interested in these topics, and they're more likely to be buying your product or service because they have this goal in mind. Very, very rarely does a customer buy a product or a service for the product or service's sake. It might be in some cases, you know, Coke is a drink and I'm thirsty, I'll buy a Coke. But, for example, you know, when I've worked in web hosting, the 99% of the customers don't lie awake at night excited about web servers. They're only buying it because their end goal is the promotion of their own business or their product or service. So their passion could be boat tours on the harbour. That's what keeps them awake at night. And the website, and therefore the infrastructure and the web hosting that allows them to do that, is peripheral. They're only going to be interested in that product on the day that they actually need it to put their website out there, and couldn't care less any other time. So content has to understand that relationship with the customer, and understand what their motivations are, what their actual goals really are, and talk to them with content that talks to that. And then by entering into the conversation and saying, you know, we can support your goals in these kinds of ways, and probably not as horrible as I just phrased that line, then you're likely to be seen as a viable solution to those problems when those problems come up on their way of achieving that goal. Another example would be with Telstra. I use this example a lot. You don't see anywhere in their marketing that Telstra's business model is about cable underneath pavements. If you go to their website, you do not see pictures of cables underneath pavements. What you see are people talking to their mum, or people, connecting their business on through their big pond or services and so on, or the advert of the dad helping his son with his homework. So those are recognizing the goals of the consumer, the customer, and that's and all of their content, all of their other stuff that they do taps into that. Yet so many businesses still put up websites that just put up shots of, to follow the Telstra analogy, shots of their version of cables underneath pavements and think this will sell it. So
what, I won't call it a campaign, but when you're sort of looking at trying to achieve something with content, what's the first thing you do? Is it the first thing you do is try to work out those personas?
Yes.
Or?
The first step is to understand who your customers are, and they're probably multiple. Another example would be a hotel, whereby your buyer personas could be a business visitor, it could be people organising a wedding, it could be a corporate event, and so therefore it could be the PA for a business that actually organises conference venues. It could be the holiday tourist and so on. So there's multiple different buyer personas, and they are looking for different things from the hotel. So when you're planning your marketing and your content strategy, how are you answering those issues? How are you getting your messaging about how you would meet those needs into your content, so that if I'm hitting your website or hitting your online marketing footprint anywhere online, that if I'm planning a wedding, that I'm going to get content from you that shows how you are the solution to my problem. So the first step is understanding what those personas are and being honest about what their behaviours are and what they are likely to do. In a generic sense, you're not going to be able to define to a highly granular level, but people looking for weddings, people of this, business travellers, or who are, therefore might be a different age group and a different familiarity with technology or social media, for example, and so on. And then when you work out, well, what is it this person's trying to achieve? What are the barriers in the way from them getting to their end goal that we can fix? How can we write content or produce content that answers those questions along the way, so that actually moves them down the buyer funnel until such parameters like, we've removed the last obstacle for them want to buy, and now then we hit them with a call to action. You don't hit them with a call to action here, you hit them with a call to action here.
You spoke earlier about content being a sort of overarching resource. What do you integrate into? Have you found particular sort of delivery methods? How would you integrate it with, say, TVCs or with open air or something like that? Do you choose it as a case-by-case basis, or do you find certain sort of methods of bringing that together would work?
It should always be a case-by-case basis. Now, again, we need to separate campaigns from your business as usual activities, and some of what I've been talking about needs to be applied to your business as usual as well. But particularly whenever you are planning, whether it's a campaign or whether it's a permanent piece of content to answer one of those questions for a buyer persona, you need to take into account, well, what are, because it can be multiple ways of reaching the right people with that content. The business traveller is probably more likely to be enticed with email rather than Twitter. But the wedding planners are probably in their mid-20s. Let's get onto Facebook. So understanding those relationships can then define not only the channels that you may reach them in, but also the format that your content might take. This guy is probably going to feel more likely to download a white paper. This one might take an ebook. Some would say they're the same things with a different design. This person may look at the YouTube video. And I think a perfect example would be the recent Coney 2012 thing that went around. Despite the failure that happened with that last week, the initial campaign, they understood their target market extremely well. They understood that it was a teenage market that they were driving, and they understood that they will consume video rather than a long article. And they reached them in the channels on Facebook and on YouTube where they hung out. So they did that strategy. They understood how these kids worked, and they reached them with the content that they knew that they would consume in a format that they knew that they would then share. It would not have worked, for example, if they'd done it as a white paper. the Cody 12 white paper would not have gone anywhere.
Might have worked with Washington a bit.
Yeah. Now they destroyed their campaign because they left far too long a lead time between that viral effect and the actual activity they wanted people to take, which in marketing terms is like, you know, they had primed the audience and then forgot to give them the call to action. You know, it's like, or that they delayed the call to action to a point whereby when that event actually happened last Friday, that everyone was supposed to go out with those posters. I think something only like 20 posters appeared in Sydney. It's like, you know, everyone had already moved on. So there was a failure at the end, but at the beginning they planned that very, very well. Trying to remember where the rest of that question.
Well, actually, while we're on sort of moving into social media, talking about that, how have you found that content and social media most effectively work together, or are they the same, or, you know? No,
there's overlap. For example, social media doesn't necessarily always need content to work. You can use social media as a customer care strategy, for example, and there are many businesses that use it exclusively for that. So as part of their support team, or reputation management, and so on in those outreaches. And understanding that your goal for those channels is important, because then you're going to apply the right metrics and the right KPIs to it when trying to, you know, understand whether it actually has an ROI for your business. But for other marketing channels whereby you actually want to drive a customer action, then yes, content becomes really important, because you're never going to be able to win someone from Twitter by putting a call to action to a tweet so much. You're going to drive them to a piece of content that recognizes that if they're coming from an open social media channel, they are almost 100% likely to be down the very beginning of the buyer funnel. Trying to hit them with late-term calls to action to actually drive an immediate conversion from Twitter link to sale is just an unlikely scenario to happen unless you are lucky enough to be, say, Dell, who actually do that quite well. But they've done that quite well because they actually primed their communities quite well to deliver that. So understanding that part of the funnel, then it's about if you are able to engage them with early stage buying cycle content, how do you then capture them so that you can continue that conversation to bring them down to mid-stage cycle and then eventually to potential conversion content? And that might be through offering them content that encourages them to give an email address. So, for example, sign up for the newsletter, or they might need to get the ebook. They need to provide their information. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it's not advisable because you want it to go broad. So it's about hitting them with those information captures at the right stage too. You don't want to turn them off too early. So if you can build your audience at this wide end of the funnel as large as you can by using content that recognizes that they're at that wide end of the funnel and encourages them to share, just like Cody did and just like some other campaigns do, then you can then work out, well, if I've got this audience and they're engaging with this content, what's a piece of content I can put at the next stage that only people who are potentially going to be viable prospects will actually come to, and maybe that's when you start to gate and capture their details, or at least cookie them so that you're following some activity. And then, down there, how do we then nurture those leads till they get to a point whereby, we've got them. So it really is about, it's not trying to capture as many possible leads as you possibly can and end up actually turning away virtually everybody. It's about building your audience really wide and then being very, very smart about what other channels that you, other pieces of content that you put out there to capture only those people who are likely to be in your buyer personas.
So you've spoken about Coney, and obviously that ultimately failed. Do you have other campaigns that you've done yourself, or that you say, that sort of really, is a best practice campaign, or that's kind of really cracked it?
Well, one of my favourites, and I know it's a famous one, so most people may already have heard it, but that does not make it any less famous, any less notable, is the Will It Blend campaign, which I think has been running now for about 4 or 5 years. And the reason why I think it's a perfect example to show is most people look at it and go, oh great, it's just a fantastically funny viral video, let's do that and we'll replicate Will It Blend success. But no, they created those YouTube videos with an express strategy behind it, which was understanding that their blenders were actually an expensive blender on the market. It was a premium blender, you know, it had more bells and whistles, and it's a quality item, but that premium price point meant that, you know, it's a problem for a lot of consumers. It's like, you know, the bargain ones would sell out and wouldn't sell this one. And so they built this campaign to A, obviously reach the widest possible audience, again, top of the funnel, but B, the actual content itself showcases the best selling point of the blender. It demonstrates without a shadow of a doubt why it has the price point that it has. It completely removes that barrier from people watching and going, you know what, now I get why it costs that little bit more to get that blender, because this thing can blend you know, a granite block. You know, it blends anything you can throw in. So there was a very clear business problem that they were solving with that piece of content that removed the customer barrier. So that's why I think it's a great example of using content marketing that, apart from the, or to many people it might look like you know, just throw something funny at the wall and hope it sticks thing. It's like, no, it's far cleverer than a lot of people give it credit for. And as a result of that campaign over the last 4 or 5 years, I think they've increased sales of that blender like by 700% or something. I think was the figure. So it worked by removing that perception.
I'm sorry, which brand was that?
Blend Tech is the blender, and it's now got its own website, willitblend.com. They're on YouTube. Just have to just Google Will It Blend, and it'll come up. And they're very funny. It's also a good example of they humanise the business by doing it. It's actually the CEO of Blend Tech that is in front of the videos and does the blending each week in his lab coat and his funny goggles, going, Will It Blend? And does this. And it's interactive too. They actually invite the audience to send in recommendations of what they would like to see put into the blender. So they've done everything from glow sticks to iPhones to you name it, they've done it. So there's that interactive element can't be underestimated as well, because it creates I don't want to overuse the word engagement, but it creates that relationship with the audience that they are part of this. And that connection makes people feel that they're not just being marketed to, but they are part of this conversation. Yeah.
We started off, you know, talking about how, you know, content perhaps isn't as recognised or as used as fully as it could be. Where do you see sort of the use of content or content marketing sort of going in, say, the next sort of five years?
I think businesses are now realising that all the SEO in the world gets you only so far. What's actually on the page or the piece of content that's there is really the end goal, is what's driving the results. Being on page 1 of Google because you've done umpteen SEO tricks may be one thing and boost all of your traffic. But does the landing page that they are on convert in any kind of meaningful way? And that conversion, an understanding of what conversion means as well is incredibly important. So like a conversion doesn't always mean that someone has hit the buy now button, because recognising again which stage they are in the cycle, a conversion could mean at this end that they actually now following you on Twitter, at this end that they've actually signed up for your email newsletter, at this end that they've actually opened those emails and clicked through to your next piece of content, and so on all the way down. So understanding and therefore allocating credit to the appropriate conversion will also, again, going back to your previous question about ROI, help people to understand what the value actually is and what they're actually getting out of it, rather than just saying you know, great, we managed to get people to sign up to our Twitter account over here, but I cannot draw a line from that guy to this sale, therefore this is worthless. It's understanding that actually, you know, getting that if you put enough strategy at every stage of that cycle, you should be able to control that path, or at least track that path all the way through, and know where the levers are to pull to be able to say, actually, you know, who works really well at this point is when we actually started sending him emails that we lost him. We need to work on the email strategy, or it might be the SEM fail, or you know. So again, it allows you to appropriately credit the activities and appropriately optimize the entire buyer funnel with the right content.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been
Thank you.
fascinating.